In the 1960s, Hanna-Barbera ruled television screens, creating animated worlds that defined childhood for millions. But while the Flintstones, the Jetsons, and Scooby-Doo live on in pop culture, many of their other creations faded into history. Tonight, we're counting down 25 forgotten Hanna-Barbera cartoons from the 1960s, shows filled with quirks, controversies, and cultural echoes now buried in time. Number 25. Shazzan, 1967 to 1969. Shazzan was a Saturday morning cartoon drenched in mystical fantasy. It followed teenage twins Chuck and Nancy, who stumble upon magical rings that summon the mighty genie Shazzan. Unlike the comedic slapstick Hanna-Barbera was famous for, this series leaned into Arabian Nights-inspired adventures. Shazzan's booming presence, his ability to conjure anything with a clap of his hands, and the surreal backdrops gave it a hypnotic charm. But Shazzan had its controversies. Critics felt the show leaned too heavily on exotic stereotypes, portraying Middle Eastern culture through a Western lens. In later decades, that cultural caricature made it less marketable for reruns. It also struggled with pacing. Episodes ended abruptly after Shazzan appeared to resolve everything instantly, reducing tension. Despite its flaws, the show fascinated kids with its mystical tone, a rare direction for Hanna-Barbera. Though it never became a household name, Shazzan paved the way for other fantasy-heavy Saturday morning cartoons. Its brief run was overshadowed by more relatable sitcom-style shows like The Flintstones and adventure favorites like Jonny Quest. Today, Shazzan is mostly remembered by collectors and fans of obscure animation. It stands as a reminder of Hanna-Barbera's willingness to experiment, even if the world wasn't quite ready to embrace this particular genie. Number 24. Winsome Witch, 1965 to 1966. Before Sabrina or Bewitched charmed audiences, Hanna-Barbera introduced us to Winsome Witch. Known affectionately as Winnie the Witch, she was a quirky sorceress with a broomstick named Norman. Each episode followed Winnie as she tried to use her magical powers for good, but her spells almost always went hilariously wrong. Though intended as light-hearted, the show faced pushback. Some parents' groups in the 1960s accused it of trivializing witchcraft, during a period when occult themes were treated with suspicion. That backlash limited its longevity and rerun potential, even though the content itself was harmless and comedic. Unlike darker portrayals of witches in folklore, Winnie was endearing, bumbling, and well-meaning, a rare attempt to make magic whimsical rather than frightening. Winsome Witch also stood out for featuring a female lead, something Hanna-Barbera seldom did at the time. However, it was produced as a supporting feature in The Secret Squirrel Show rather than given a full spotlight, which kept it overshadowed. Kids enjoyed the yum-dun slapstick and Winnie's cheerful catchphrase, "I'll hocus pocus you." But without strong merchandising or ongoing syndication, the character drifted into obscurity. Today, Winsome Witch is a curiosity, a forgotten witch who represents Hanna-Barbera's attempt to bring magical comedy into the mainstream. Though her broom doesn't fly often in pop culture anymore, her laugh and charm still linger for those who stumble across this buried classic. Number 23. Squiddly Diddly, 1965 to 1966. If Hanna-Barbera could make a talking bear, why not a squid? Enter Squiddly Diddly, a lovable pink squid living at Bubbleland, a sea-themed amusement park. Squiddly dreamed of being a world-famous musician, but constantly found himself in comical mishaps. His upbeat optimism and unique design gave him instant appeal, though the premise was unusual even for Hanna-Barbera standards. The show ran as a segment within The Secret Squirrel Show. Despite Squiddly's charm, he struggled to connect with audiences. Some critics saw it as a weak attempt to replicate the success of earlier anthropomorphic characters like Yogi Bear. His nautical setting limited story ideas, and his slapstick gags often felt recycled. Another challenge was cultural competition. By the mid-1960s, animated animals were everywhere on Saturday mornings, making it hard for Squiddly to stand out. Though harmless, the character was sometimes criticized for being overly simplistic, lacking the satirical or adventurous angles of more successful Hanna-Barbera shows. Still, Squiddly represents the studio's willingness to try something different. A squid musician was certainly unexpected, and in a way it foreshadowed later zany creations like Nickelodeon's SpongeBob SquarePants. Though Squiddly never achieved fame, his cheerful spirit and aquatic hijinks remain an odd but memorable footnote in the Hanna-Barbera catalog. Number 22. Secret Squirrel, 1965 to 1966. Part spy spoof, part slapstick comedy, Secret Squirrel was Hanna-Barbera's answer to the James Bond craze. Featuring a trench-coat-wearing squirrel armed with high-tech gadgets, the show combined espionage with goofy humor. His sidekick, Morocco Mole, added comic relief as the bumbling partner who always found himself in sticky situations. The show debuted during the height of Cold War spy mania. Kids loved the gadgets and villains, while parents appreciated its parody of the increasingly popular spy genre. But Secret Squirrel was not without controversy. Some critics pointed out that its villains leaned heavily on cultural stereotypes with exaggerated accents and caricatures that don't hold up today. Another challenge was its time slot. Running as part of the Adam Ant Secret Squirrel show, it often got overshadowed by the more action-driven Adam Ant. Despite this, Secret Squirrel proved influential, inspiring future spy parodies like Inspector Gadget. The character even made a comeback in the 1990s on Cartoon Network, proving his trench coat had some staying power. Still, in the vast Hanna-Barbera library, Secret Squirrel often gets overlooked. His goofy gadgetry and campy style reflected both the excitement and the absurdity of the 1960s spy obsession. For kids of that decade, he was their very own Bond, just furrier, funnier, and endlessly inventive. Number 21. The Hillbilly Bears, 1965 to 1967. Spinning off from the Adam Ant Show, The Hillbilly Bears was Hanna-Barbera's rural comedy entry, riffing on the growing popularity of hillbilly humor in American television. The series followed Paw Rugg and his family as they navigated life in the mountains, often feuding with neighbors and bumbling through everyday situations. The show was both loved and criticized. Its rustic humor appealed to audiences who enjoyed sitcoms like The Beverly Hillbillies, but others found its portrayal of mountain folk as gun-toting and unintelligible to be offensive stereotypes. Paw Rugg's mumbled voice became a running gag, but it also frustrated viewers who struggled to understand him. Despite these issues, kids adored the slapstick feuds and silly antics, making it a recognizable part of Hanna-Barbera's mid-60s lineup. However, the cultural climate shifted, and rural caricatures became less popular. As a result, the Hillbilly Bears slipped into obscurity, rarely revived in syndication. Today, the show remains a fascinating relic. It reflects a time when rural comedy dominated American screens, but also highlights how quickly trends can fade. The Hillbilly Bears may not have climbed to the heights of Yogi Bear or Huckleberry Hound, but their mountain misadventures remain a quirky footnote in Hanna-Barbera history. Number 20. Precious Pup, 1965 to 1967. Part of the Adam Ant Secret Squirrel show, Precious Pup starred a seemingly sweet old lady named Granny Sweet and her not-so-sweet dog, Precious. On the surface, Precious looked like a harmless pooch, but once provoked, his deep, menacing growl terrified bullies, crooks, and anyone foolish enough to underestimate him. The contrast between Granny's gentle demeanor and Precious's frightening bark was the show's central gag. Kids loved watching the transformation from cuddly to ferocious, often capped off with Precious's trademark wheezy laugh. Still, some critics argued the humor relied too much on repetition, with little variation between episodes. Controversy also followed the show's exaggerated depiction of violence. Precious often chased or mauled villains in slapstick fashion, echoing the tradition of Tom and Jerry-style comedy. By the mid-1960s, watchdog groups began calling for less aggressive children's programming, and this may have limited the show's rerun potential. While not a breakout hit, Precious Pup carved out a cult following. His wheezy laugh became instantly recognizable to those who grew up with him. Though rarely revived, the character occasionally popped up in later Hanna-Barbera specials, proof that even a forgotten cartoon can leave an unforgettable soundbite. Today, Precious Pup remains a quirky, half-remembered gem that showcased Hanna-Barbera's playful mix of innocence and bite. Number 19. Atom Ant, 1965 to 1967. Before Marvel made ants superheroes, Hanna-Barbera gave us Atom Ant. This tiny insect packed atomic strength, using his powers to battle crime, mad scientists, and invading villains. Atom Ant lived in a humble anthill, but had a hotline to police stations and military bases, always ready to save the day. Atom Ant symbolized 1960s optimism about science and technology. His atomic powers reflected fascination with nuclear energy, though presented in a cheerful, non-threatening way. Kids admired his courage, and his "Up and Atom, Atom Ant" catchphrase stuck in playgrounds across America. But the show wasn't without issues. Critics pointed out that some villains leaned on cultural stereotypes, and the simplistic storylines often recycled familiar Hanna-Barbera tropes. In later decades, Atom Ant faded from television schedules, partly due to its heavy Cold War undertones. Despite fading from memory, Atom Ant influenced the superhero cartoon trend that flourished in the late 60s. Alongside Space Ghost and Birdman, he helped bridge the gap between slapstick animals and full-fledged hero adventures. While not as iconic as Scooby-Doo, Atom Ant remains a fascinating relic of a time when even the tiniest insect could stand tall as a Saturday morning superhero. Number 18. Yippee, Yappee, and Yahooey, 1964 to 1966. This trio of bumbling royal guardsmen debuted as part of the Potamus show. Yippee, Yappee, and Yahooey were supposed to protect their king, but their incompetence often caused more trouble than they solved. Inspired loosely by the Three Musketeers, the show relied on slapstick chaos and the exaggerated personalities of the three canine knights. Audiences enjoyed the medieval setting mixed with modern humor, but critics weren't impressed. The repetitive plots, guards messing up, kings scolding them, disaster striking, quickly grew stale. The animation was also more limited than earlier Hanna-Barbera efforts, showing the studio's cost-cutting approach during the decade. The show sparked minor controversy for its portrayal of the king as foolish and temperamental, which some felt undermined respect for authority in children's programming. While mild by today's standards, this criticism reflected growing parental scrutiny of Saturday morning cartoons. Despite fading from syndication, the trio had occasional cameos in later Hanna-Barbera specials, proof they weren't entirely forgotten. They never reached the fame of Huckleberry Hound or Yogi Bear, but their slapstick medieval antics represent the studio's willingness to experiment with unusual settings. Today, Yippee, Yappee, and Yahooey remain a faint memory of Hanna-Barbera's middle-tier output, fun for its time, but quickly eclipsed by stronger characters. Number 17. Breezly and Sneezely, 1964 to 1966. Set in the Arctic, this cartoon followed Breezly Bruin, a clever polar bear, and his sneezy sidekick, Sneezely Seal. Constantly scheming to sneak into Camp Frostbite, a military base, the duo clashed with the no-nonsense Colonel Fuzzby. The setup was simple: Breezly's cunning versus the Colonel's discipline, with Sneezely's uncontrollable sneezing often causing chaos. Though imaginative, the show drew criticism for its military parody. Some parents worried about children laughing at authority figures during the Cold War, when respect for the military was considered essential. This likely hurt its chances of longevity. Still, kids loved the mismatched duo and the snowy slapstick scenarios. The show's limited run and niche Arctic setting made it easy to forget once Hanna-Barbera moved on to more marketable series. Yet Breezely and Sneezely stood out for their unusual partnership, brains and clumsiness working together in a frosty world. While rarely rerun, Breezely and Sneezely occasionally popped up in Hanna-Barbera comic books and cameo appearances. They're remembered today as part of the studio's experimental streak, mixing animal hijinks with topical themes. Forgotten by most, they still carry the chilly charm of a cartoon that dared to be different. Number 16. Peter Potamus and So-So, 1964 to 1966. The Peter Potamus Show was Hanna-Barbera's attempt to blend adventure with comedy. Peter Potamus, a purple hippopotamus, and his monkey sidekick, So-So, traveled the world in a hot air balloon that could also travel through time. Each episode dropped them into different eras, where Peter's good nature and mighty hippo hurricane holler saved the day. The show's time travel gimmick gave it unique storytelling potential, but budget constraints kept the animation and plots repetitive. Some episodes leaned on broad cultural stereotypes, making reruns problematic in later years. Still, the concept was ahead of its time, foreshadowing future time travel cartoons like Peabody and Sherman. Peter Potamus's deep voice and catchphrases made him a recognizable figure during his brief run. However, when compared to Yogi Bear or Huckleberry Hound, his appeal felt less distinct. Without strong syndication, the character faded into obscurity. Yet Peter Potamus resurfaced decades later in Cartoon Network's Harvey Birdman, Attorney at Law, where he became a cult favorite among adult audiences. While his original show is largely forgotten, Peter Potamus and So-So represent Hanna-Barbera's willingness to push their characters beyond the ordinary. They remain whimsical reminders of how even forgotten hippos once floated proudly across Saturday morning screens. Number 15. Punkin, Puss, and Mushmouse, 1964 to 1966. Borrowing from the classic cat and mouse formula, Punkin, Puss, and Mushmouse transplanted the eternal chase into the American South. Punkin Puss, a hillbilly cat with a rifle, constantly tried to catch Mushmouse, the clever rodent living in his backyard. What followed was a rustic variation of Tom and Jerry, steeped in Southern flavor. While entertaining, the series drew controversy for its heavy use of rural stereotypes. The exaggerated Southern accents and constant gunfire fed into concerns about how cartoons portrayed violence and regional caricatures. Parents groups in the mid-1960s worried about children imitating Punkin Puss's trigger-happy antics, particularly during a time when debates about TV violence were heating up. Despite its flaws, the slapstick charm of Mushmouse repeatedly outsmarting Punkin Puss won laughs from kids. Still, the series never built a strong identity beyond being a country-themed riff on familiar tropes. Once the rural comedy fad passed, it faded quickly from TV schedules. Today, Punkin Puss and Mushmouse is remembered as a footnote in Hanna-Barbera history, a quirky experiment that reflected the cultural obsession with rustic humor in the 1960s, but lacked staying power. Its legacy lies in how even Hanna-Barbera's minor works mirrored broader television trends of their time. Number 14. Ricochet Rabbit and Droop Along, 1964 to 1965. Set in the Wild West, this series introduced Ricochet Rabbit, the fastest sheriff in the West, and his slow-witted deputy, Droop Along Coyote. Ricochet's catchphrase, "Ping, ping, ping." Ricochet Rabbit matched his lightning-fast bouncing around town to catch outlaws. The series leaned into Western tropes, parodying shootouts and saloon brawls. However, critics pointed out the repetitive plots. Ricochet zooms in, thwarts the villains, Droop Along bungles something, and order is restored. While amusing, the formula wore thin quickly. Controversy came from its slapstick gunplay. In an era of rising concern about violence in children's TV, the constant firearms gags became a sticking point. As networks began regulating cartoon content in the late 1960s, Ricochet Rabbit was one of the casualties. Despite that, the character lived on in reruns and comic books, remembered fondly by those who loved his rapid-fire antics. Later generations rediscovered Ricochet Rabbit in nostalgic Hanna-Barbera retrospectives, though he never regained mainstream fame. Today, Ricochet Rabbit remains a symbol of Hanna-Barbera's Western craze, capturing both the humor and the limitations of slapstick lawmen on Saturday mornings. Number 13. The Magilla Gorilla Show, 1964 to 1967. One of Hanna-Barbera's more commercially driven shows, the Magilla Gorilla Show centered on a lovable gorilla sold from Peebles' pet shop to various families, only to be returned after chaos ensued. Each episode repeated this cycle, with Magilla's cheerful innocence clashing against a world unprepared for a gorilla as a pet. Magilla became a merchandising success, plastered on lunchboxes, toys, and clothing. Yet the show faced criticism for its thin plots and over-reliance on recycled slapstick. Some cultural observers also noted uncomfortable undertones, pointing out that Magilla's ownership and repeated rejections mirrored social anxieties of the time. Despite these issues, Magilla struck a chord with children who empathized with his desire to be loved and accepted. His catchphrase, "We've got a gorilla for sale," became a household jingle in the mid-1960s. The series also introduced supporting segments like Ricochet Rabbit and Punkin Puss, which broadened its reach. Still, by the late 1960s, Magilla's popularity waned, overshadowed by newer creations like Scooby-Doo. Today, Magilla Gorilla is largely forgotten outside hardcore Hanna-Barbera circles, but his short-lived popularity highlights how cartoons often doubled as marketing machines. He remains a reminder of when Hanna-Barbera experimented with blending heartwarming innocence and commercial appeal. Number 12. The Jetsons, 1962 to 1963. Although the Jetsons eventually became iconic, its original run in the early 1960s lasted just one season. Positioned as a futuristic counterpart to the Flintstones, it imagined a space-age family with flying cars, robot maids, and life in Orbit City. Despite its creative world-building, the show struggled in prime time, competing against Walt Disney's Wonderful World of Color. Ratings lagged, leading to its cancellation after 24 episodes. For years, The Jetsons was considered a flop. Controversy surrounded its futuristic stereotypes. Critics noted how it still reflected 1960s gender norms, with Jane Jetson portrayed as a housewife despite all the technological advancements around her. Some also pointed out the show's satirical edge, mocking consumerism and gadget dependency. Though forgotten during its original run, the Jetsons found new life in reruns during the 1970s and beyond, eventually becoming a cultural touchstone. However, in the 1960s, it was another Hanna-Barbera experiment that couldn't quite land with audiences. Its brief original run makes it a forgotten show of its decade, one that only later earned its place as an animated classic. Number 11. Lippy the Lion and Hardy Har Har, 1962 to 1963. This odd pairing featured Lippy, an eternally optimistic lion, and Hardy Har Har, a gloomy hyena. Their dynamic mirrored the classic comedic trope of cheerful optimist versus pessimistic sidekick. Each episode saw Lippy dragging Hardy into wild schemes, with Hardy's constant "oh dear, oh my" gloominess providing the punchline. The show's humor was quirky but repetitive, relying heavily on the duo's contrasting personalities. Kids enjoyed the slapstick, but critics found the lack of plot variety frustrating. Unlike Yogi Bear or Huckleberry Hound, Lippy and Hardy failed to gain distinctive appeal beyond their one-joke premise. Cultural critics later noted how Hardy's character reflected rising anxieties in the 1960s, with his depressive outlook unintentionally mirroring social unrest. Still, for young audiences, he was mostly comic relief. The show's forgettability stemmed from its placement in the Hanna-Barbera new cartoon series, where it was overshadowed by stronger creations like Wally Gator. Without syndication support, it slipped into obscurity. Today, Lippy and Hardy are remembered primarily through cameos in later Hanna-Barbera specials, serving as a reminder of the studio's endless experimentation with duos. While not as enduring as other pairs, their mix of optimism and pessimism carved a small, strange niche in cartoon history. Number 10. Touché Turtle and Dum Dum, 1962 to 1963. Armed with a rapier and boundless confidence, Touché Turtle was Hanna-Barbera's swashbuckling reptile hero. Accompanied by his loyal but dim-witted canine sidekick, Dum Dum, Touché battled villains across time and place, from medieval castles to the Wild West. His cry of "Touché away" gave him a heroic flair, even if his victories were often accidental. The series was part of the Hanna-Barbera new cartoon series, but it never achieved lasting fame. Critics noted that while the adventurous settings were fun, the limited animation and repetitive formulas dulled the excitement. Still, children were captivated by the fast-paced sword fights and exaggerated humor. Some controversy arose from the show's casual depiction of swordplay and violence. Parents' groups, already wary of slapstick gunplay in cartoons, questioned whether children should see characters using blades as comedy props. Though mild compared to action shows today, this criticism contributed to its short shelf life. Despite being largely forgotten, Touché Turtle stood out as one of Hanna-Barbera's earliest attempts to mix slapstick animals with adventurous heroics. Later characters like Hong Kong Phooey built on this formula more successfully. Touché, however, remains a curious relic, a turtle who dreamed of being a knight, remembered only by those who cheered his sword-swinging cry. Number 9. Wally Gator, 1962 to 1963. Wally Gator told the story of a friendly alligator living in a zoo, constantly escaping to explore the outside world. Each time his caretaker, Mr. Twiddle, tried, and usually failed, to bring him back. The series was light-hearted, but thin in concept, relying on Wally's upbeat personality and inevitable capture. Wally's southern drawl and cheerful outlook made him likable, but his adventures quickly grew repetitive. Critics pointed out that his constant desire to leave the zoo, only to be dragged back, gave the show a depressing undertone. Freedom always denied. Some later observers even interpreted Wally's plight as an unintentional allegory about captivity and conformity. Cultural critics also flagged its reliance on rural caricatures, while children simply saw a goofy alligator with endless optimism. The limited animation of the early 60s didn't help its memorability either. Though never a breakout star, Wally Gator became a nostalgic footnote, remembered mostly by die-hard Hanna-Barbera fans. His cheerful spirit masked a darker reality, a cartoon that accidentally reflected real social anxieties of its time. Today, Wally Gator swims mostly in obscurity, a reminder of how even smiling reptiles can fade from cultural memory. Number 8. Top Cat, 1961 to 1962. Despite later cult status, Top Cat was a primetime disappointment during its original run. Modeled loosely on the Phil Silvers Show, it followed a gang of alley cats led by the slick and street-smart Top Cat, who was always hustling for the next scheme while dodging the ever-frustrated Officer Dibble. At the time, Top Cat was promoted heavily, even airing in the coveted evening slot. But ratings lagged, and it was canceled after just 30 episodes. Many critics dismissed it as too derivative, borrowing sitcom humor from live-action shows rather than innovating. Controversy came from its portrayal of law enforcement. Officer Dibble was shown as bumbling and easily duped, which some parents worried undermined respect for authority figures. Its urban setting also clashed with the suburban and family-friendly tone audiences expected from animated shows. Yet in reruns, Top Cat flourished. Kids loved the streetwise cats, the jazzy theme song, and the quick-witted banter. Internationally, especially in Latin America, Top Cat became a beloved classic, proving its appeal transcended its early struggles. In the 1960s, though, it was largely forgotten, a bold experiment in primetime animation that initially fell flat, only to be rediscovered decades later. Number 7. Snagglepuss, 1961 to 1962. Best remembered today for his catchphrase, "Heavens to Murgatroyd." Snagglepuss was originally a supporting character in the Yogi Bear Show before spinning off into his own shorts. This pink mountain lion, with his theatrical mannerisms and love for drama, became one of Hanna-Barbera's quirkiest creations. Despite his unique personality, Snagglepuss never achieved mainstream stardom. His segments often recycled standard slapstick plots, with his flamboyant antics carrying the weight of the humor. Critics found the gags uneven, and without a strong supporting cast, his series faded quickly. Controversy surrounded the character's exaggerated mannerisms, which some later critics read as stereotypical. While not intended maliciously, these portrayals made broadcasters hesitant to keep Snagglepuss in reruns. By the 1970s, he was mostly relegated to cameo appearances. Still, his theatricality and unusual persona made him a cult favorite. Snagglepuss became a fixture in Hanna-Barbera's larger ensemble specials, remembered less for his actual shorts and more for his unforgettable voice and catchphrases. In the pantheon of Forgotten Hanna-Barbera cartoons, Snagglepuss occupies a special spot. Not entirely erased, but remembered more for a single phrase than the stories that once carried him. Number 6. Yakky Doodle, 1961 to 1962. A small duck with a big heart, Yakky Doodle first appeared on the Yogi Bear Show. Often targeted by predators due to his tiny size, Yakky relied on his loyal bulldog friend Chopper for protection. The formula was simple. Yakky got into trouble, Chopper saved the day, and comic mischief followed. Kids adored Yakky's innocence, but critics pointed out the repetitive storylines and lack of character development. Some also noted the troubling undertone of Yakky being perpetually vulnerable, always dependent on his larger protector. This dynamic limited his growth and made the series feel shallow over time. The show also faced scrutiny for its slapstick violence, as predators repeatedly tried to harm Yakky. While softened by humor, watchdog groups in the 60s flagged it as too aggressive for younger viewers. Despite fading from syndication, Yakky left a soft imprint on audiences who empathized with his constant struggle to stay safe in a harsh world. He never reached the status of Yogi Bear or Huckleberry Hound, but his bond with Chopper gave the series heart. Forgotten by most, Yakky Doodle remains a faint but tender note in Hanna-Barbera's library. Number 5. The Yogi Bear Show, 1961 to 1962. While Yogi Bear became one of Hanna-Barbera's most enduring icons, his original standalone series is often overshadowed by later spin-offs and specials. The Yogi Bear Show was the first to give a Hanna-Barbera side character his own spotlight after debuting on the Huckleberry Hound Show. The show featured Yogi, his sidekick Boo Boo, and Ranger Smith in Jellystone Park. Each episode revolved around Yogi's clever, if misguided, attempts to steal picnic baskets. Alongside these shorts were supporting segments, introducing Snagglepuss and Yakky Doodle. Though beloved, the show sparked minor controversies. Parents complained that Yogi's constant rule-breaking sent the wrong message to kids, encouraging them to undermine authority. Meanwhile, park rangers were reportedly annoyed at being portrayed as buffoons. Still, Yogi's charm and wit made him a cultural phenomenon. Despite its initial success, the Yogi Bear Show faded into the background of the Hanna-Barbera empire as newer properties like Scooby-Doo dominated. Today, fans remember Yogi as a mascot more than the star of his original show, leaving the series itself forgotten in the grand scheme of cartoon history. Number 4. The Quick Draw McGraw Show, 1959 to 1961, aired into early 60s. Quick Draw McGraw, the bumbling sheriff of the Old West, was another Hanna-Barbera attempt to parody authority figures. Accompanied by his loyal burro sidekick, Baba Louie, Quick Draw constantly bungled law enforcement, often saved only by luck. The show also introduced one of Hanna-Barbera's strangest alter egos, El Kabong, Quick Draw's masked identity who fought villains with a guitar. This bizarre superhero parody became a fan favorite, though critics found it nonsensical. Controversy arose from Quick Draw's exaggerated Mexican sidekick, Baba Louie, who relied heavily on cultural stereotypes. While considered harmless at the time, later audiences found the portrayal problematic. Parents also voiced concern over the constant slapstick gunplay, echoing wider debates about cartoon violence. Although once a cornerstone of Hanna-Barbera's early TV lineup, the Quick Draw McGraw Show was eventually buried beneath the studio's bigger hits. Its cultural legacy survives through El Kabong references, but the show itself has been largely forgotten outside nostalgia circles. Number 3. Loopy De Loop, 1959 to 1965. Loopy De Loop was Hanna-Barbera's only theatrical cartoon series of the 1960s. The polite French-Canadian wolf starred in shorts shown before feature films. His catchphrase, "I am Loopy De Loop, the good wolf," reflected his endless attempts to convince people he wasn't like other wolves. The series was unusual in tone, more moralistic than comedic. Loopy's efforts to be kind were almost always misunderstood, leading to rejection and ridicule. This made the shorts bittersweet, touching on themes of prejudice and discrimination. While praised by some, others criticized it as too heavy-handed for children. Loopy's thick French accent also drew controversy, as some felt it mocked cultural differences. The lack of consistent humor compared to Yogi Bear or Huckleberry Hound further limited his popularity. Though it ran for 6 years in theaters, Loopy De Loop was largely forgotten once Hanna-Barbera focused on television. Today, he remains an oddity, a wolf who wanted desperately to be loved, remembered more for his message than his jokes. Number 2. The Rough and Ready Show, 1957 to 1960 into early 60s. As Hanna-Barbera's very first TV cartoon, The Rough and Ready Show deserves recognition, even if it's nearly forgotten today. The series followed Rough, a smart cat, and Ready, a dim-witted dog, as they embarked on serialized adventures across land, sea, and even outer space. The show was groundbreaking. Unlike later gag-based shorts, Rough and Ready told continuing stories across episodes, keeping kids tuning in week after week. Its limited animation style became the blueprint for Hanna-Barbera's future productions. However, its slow pacing and crude visuals didn't age well. By the mid-1960s, audiences preferred the snappier humor of Yogi Bear or the Flintstones. Controversy was minimal, though some critics noted its stereotypical villains and recycled plots. Despite fading quickly from reruns, The Rough and Ready Show was the seed that grew into Hanna-Barbera's empire. Without Rough and Ready proving that TV cartoons could succeed, there might never have been a Flintstones, Jetsons, or Scooby-Doo. Forgotten by most, but historically vital, Rough and Ready were the pioneers who started it all. Number 1. The Flagstones Pilot, The Flintstones Pilot, 1960. Before the Flintstones became the first primetime animated sitcom, it began as the Flagstones. This pilot, rarely seen by the public, introduced Fred, Wilma, Barney, and Betty in rougher animation and slightly different personalities. The name was quickly changed to avoid copyright issues, and the Flintstones was born. The pilot itself is largely forgotten, overshadowed by the monumental success of the actual series. Yet, it represents Hanna-Barbera's most daring gamble, bringing cartoons to adult audiences in a sitcom format. Initially dismissed as a gimmick, the Flintstones went on to shape television history. While the pilot never sparked controversy itself, the full series did, facing criticism for its portrayal of smoking and its heavy reliance on laugh tracks. Still, the pilot remains a fascinating piece of lost history, a glimpse at what might have been had Hanna-Barbera not refined their idea. Forgotten outside animation circles, the Flagstones is a reminder that even legends begin humbly. Without it, the animated sitcom landscape might never have existed. And there you have it. 25 forgotten Hanna-Barbera cartoons from the 1960s. Some were experimental, some controversial, and some simply overshadowed, but all left their mark on television history. Which of these do you remember? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more hidden gems.